So we started our class with chapter number 7. We started chapter number 7 in the very beginning of our lessons this semester. The first thing we talked about was fraud and internal control. And we know that fraud is tazwir or sariqa. And there are 3 factors in fraud. Remember the triangle, al-muthallath, with the 3 factors involved in fraud. You need to know all of those factors. We also talked about internal control, as-saytira dakhiliya. And there are many components that we discussed in the class. We talked about the methods and measures, the primary components, the principles of internal control activities, and lastly we talked about the limitations. You should study and know all of these very well. In chapter 7 we also talked about the cash controls, as-saytira ala al-nuqud. And we gave some calculations using the petty cash. You need to know how to solve the petty cash calculations. We also talked about the uses of the bank. And when we talked about uses of the bank, we talked about many types of forms and processes. تكلمنا في الاستمارات والإجراءات وفي النهاية تكلمنا في bank reconciliation calculation. You need to know how to reconcile تعديل بين البنك والشركة. يعني لازم أن يكون على مستوى على سواء كما ذكرنا. And chapter number 8 تكلمنا في accounts receivable. We talked about accounts receivable. And within accounts receivable, we talked about the types of receivables. And we said there are 3 types of receivables. You need to know all 3. We also talked about recognizing account receivable. متى نسجل وكيف نسجل الأكاونت receivable؟ إنما يكون السيل البيع أو إنما يكون العائد a return أو إنما يكون الدفع. You need to know in these 3 cases how do we record the account receivable. Also we talked about valuing account receivables and we gave you 2 methods. Okay? Sometimes we use the bad debt expense only, and other times we use account allowance for doubtful accounts. هذا إنما يكون الدين السيء، الدين الذي لا يدفع أبدا أو يدفع بعد الحين. This is what we mean by valuing account receivables. Sometimes we have a bad debt, sometimes we use an allowance for doubtful accounts. You need to know the difference between the 2 and using the examples that we give you before. And the last thing we talked about in chapter number 8 was the credit card sales. You need to know how to record a journal entry for the credit card sales using a nisba, fee percentage. Chapter number 9, we first talked about plant assets. هذا we sometimes call fixed assets, sometimes we call this property, plant and equipment. These are al-usul al-thabita. Okay? And we gave you examples like building, land, machines, computers. All of these things we use in the business for a long period of time. These are what we call plant assets. So you need to know how to find the cost. أنتم مسؤولون على كيفية الحصول على كيفية تحاسب التكلفة بالنسبة للبلانت assets. مثلا السيارة، عندما تشتري سيارة كم يكون التكلفة الذي نسجل، أو عندما يكون البيت جديد أو الأرض، كل ما يدخل في تكلفة لازم أن تسجلها عند الحصول على مثل هذه الأصول. And we also talked about depreciation. Depreciation is istihlak. And we gave you 3 factors you need to find when you calculate depreciation. And we also taught you about the 3 methods that you need to use when you find depreciation. So this is, in general, this is what you learned in chapter number 9.